Fuck the werewolf plague. When xenobiologist Dylan Hill heard Edus Prime was going wolfy after the virus hit, he mounted his pulse rifle, packed his med kit, and hopped the first transport to the jungle planet. Because this plague was screwing with the wrong species. Good, you're here. Dylan's blue-skinned Edosian colleague Fornax greeted him at the research outpost landing pad, nestled in the dense, mist-shrouded jungle, bioluminescent tattoos flashing urgently. Labs this way. We've lost 4 more settlements since you launched. Dylan double-timed into the lab and snapped on gloves. Show me the pathogen. The hollow flooded with DNA helices and protein models as Fornax briefed him. This new virus somehow rewrote Edosian genetic code, triggering a feral transformation into vicious beasts that infected others through bites and scratches. Millions were already lost. The uncontrolled spread threatened extinction within weeks. Edosians have requested aid from the Galactic Council, but you know how slow they are. I petitioned for the human delegation to get involved immediately. You're our best shot at curing this before we're all monsters, Fornax said bleakly. Or before the Council decides to sanitize our world. Like hell they will. I'll synthesize a cure if I have to drain my own damn blood. Dylan cracked his neck, rolling up his sleeves. Dozens of species had a strict no-contact protocol with anything human, terrified of contracting one of the myriad viruses that somehow only made Terrans stronger. I didn't come all this way to fail. Let's get to work. Hours blurred together as they lost themselves in the data, racing against the planet's dwindling clock. Sweat soaked Dylan's back as he hunched over cultures and simulations. He'd cracked tougher nuts than this. A shattering beaker made them jump. Dylan whirled, grabbing his rifle. The outpost's unreliable security had already failed twice that day. Fornax said werewolves had been spotted in the jungle nearby. Were they already... There's no time, Fornax whispered hoarsely. It's spreading too fast. Someone needs to get the research off-world before... A chilling howl sliced the night, far too close. They're coming! Go! Dylan's fingers flew across the haptic interface, eyes darting between readouts as he analyzed the virus's genome. The pathogen was a chimera, stitched together from disparate strands of DNA that shouldn't coexist. It adapted at a frightening rate, mutating to resist every treatment he devised. I've never seen anything like this, he muttered, leaning back in his chair. The lab's harsh lighting cast deep shadows across his face. Fornax paced nearby, his bioluminescent tattoos flickering erratically. We're running out of time. The infected are getting closer. As if on cue, a bone-chilling howl pierced the night, sending shivers down Dylan's spine. He tried to focus on his work, but strange occurrences kept disrupting his progress. Equipment malfunctioned at critical moments, samples vanished from secure storage, and the outpost systems glitched without explanation. Fornax's paranoia grew with each incident. He pulled Dylan aside, voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. Someone's sabotaging us. There's a traitor among the researchers. Dylan shook his head, dismissing the notion. We're all on edge. It's just stress getting to us. But the incidents escalated, and tensions simmered in the cramped confines of the outpost. Researchers eyed each other with suspicion, accusations flying in hushed tones. Dylan tried to remain focused on the virus, convincing himself that the strange occurrences were hallucinations born of exhaustion and fear. Until the damning evidence landed on his desk. A grainy security camera image, captured in the dead of night, showed a shadowy figure tampering with the outpost's perimeter defenses. The figure's eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light, the unmistakable mark of werewolf infection. Dylan's blood ran cold. They weren't just racing against time, they were trapped in a nest of spies and traitors. The werewolf virus had already infiltrated their ranks, and he had no way of knowing who to trust. As he stared at the image, the weight of their predicament crashed down on him. To find a cure, he would have to navigate a web of deceit, unraveling the secrets of the virus while watching his back at every turn. Because now, the enemy was within, and the clock was ticking down to their inevitable doom. Dylan's wristcom pinged with an incoming message, the shrill tone piercing the tense silence of the lab. He tapped the screen, a hologram of an elderly Adosian flickering to life. The village elder, his face lined with age and worry, spoke in a hoarse whisper. "Dr. Hill, I must speak with you urgently. The fate of our world hangs in the balance." Fornax leaned in, his brow furrowed. What could he want at a time like this? Dylan shook his head, already moving to gather his gear. "I don't know, but we can't ignore a direct request from the elder. He might have information about the virus. We have to take that chance. If there's even a sliver of hope, we need to pursue it." The journey through the jungle was harrowing, each step fraught with unseen perils. Vines snatched at their ankles, and eerie calls echoed through the dense canopy. Dylan's rifle felt heavy in his hands, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. As they approached the village, an unnatural stillness settled over the area. The usual bustle of life was absent, replaced by an oppressive silence. Fornax's tattoos dimmed, his unease palpable. Before Dylan could respond, a figure emerged from the central hut, ancient markings glowing faintly in the gloom. The elder, his frail form shrouded in tattered robes, beckoned them closer. "Dr. Hill, thank you for coming," he rasped, his voice thin and reedy. "I fear I have kept this secret for far too long." He revealed the horrifying truth, each word a dagger to Dylan's heart. The virus was not a natural plague, but a creation of an ancient Adosian cult that sought to harness the primal power of the beast. They had toiled in secret for generations, perfecting the virus to unleash upon the world. With trembling hands, the elder presented Dylan with an ancient tome, its pages filled with arcane symbols and diagrams. "This is the key to understanding the virus," he wheezed, his breath rattling in his chest. Suddenly the elder doubled over, racked by a violent coughing fit. Dylan rushed to his aid, but Fornax's cry of horror stopped him cold. The elder's body convulsed, bones snapping and reforming as fur erupted from his skin. His face elongated into a snarling muzzle, eyes blazing with feral hunger. Dylan barely had time to react as the elder, now a fully transformed werewolf, lunged at him with razor-sharp claws. He stumbled back, the tome clutched to his chest, as Fornax's screams echoed through the village. Dylan's heart pounded as he and Fornax tore through the dense jungle, the ancient tome gripped tightly to his chest. Vines whipped at their faces and tangled around their ankles, threatening to drag them down. Howls pierced the night, each one closer than the last. "They're gaining on us," Fornax panted, his tattoos flashing erratically. Dylan didn't dare look back. He focused on putting one foot in front of the other, pushing through the burn in his lungs. The outpost's lights glimmered through the trees, a beacon of hope in the darkness. They burst through the perimeter, the security system barely recognizing their biometrics, before the gates slammed shut behind them. Dylan doubled over, gasping for breath. Fornax slumped against the wall, his skin pale and clammy. Inside, chaos reigned. Researchers huddled together, voices rising in panic. Equipment lay strewn across the floor as if tossed aside in haste. Dylan scanned the room, a sinking feeling in his gut. "Where's Zephyr? And Lyra?" he demanded, naming two of their colleagues. A young Adosian researcher stepped forward, her eyes wide with fear. "They're gone. They went to check the perimeter and never came back." Dylan's grip tightened on the tome. They were running out of time. He pushed through the crowd, making his way to the lab. Fornax trailed behind him, a haunted look on his face. He sealed the door shut, isolating himself from the madness outside. The tome lay open on the desk, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. Dylan pored over the cryptic symbols, his brow furrowed in concentration. The cult's twisted experiments unfolded before him, each revelation more horrifying than the last. Dylan's heart raced as he delved deeper into the tome, searching for any clue that could lead to a cure. The ancient Adosian language was complex and layered, each symbol holding multiple meanings. He worked tirelessly, his eyes straining in the dim light of the lab. Minutes turned to hours, and the howls outside grew louder and more insistent. Dylan's head pounded, exhaustion tugging at the edges of his consciousness. But he pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that the fate of an entire world rested on his shoulders. Dylan barely looked up from the tome, his mind racing with possibilities. The key to stopping the virus was here, hidden within these pages. He just needed more time. A sudden bang on the door made them both jump. Claws scraped against the metal and a low growl rumbled through the air. The werewolves were here, and they were hungry for blood. Dylan's hand shook as he turned another page, desperate for answers. The clock was ticking, and with each passing second, their chances of survival grew slimmer. He gritted his teeth, pushing back the fear that threatened to consume him. He had to stay focused. He had to find the cure. No matter the cost. Dylan stared at the ancient tome, his eyes straining in the flickering light of the lab. The cryptic symbols seemed to dance across the page, taunting him with their hidden meaning. He rubbed his temples, trying to focus through the pounding in his head. Suddenly, a pattern emerged from the chaos. Dylan's heart raced as he deciphered the crucial passage, revealing the location of an ancient Edosian temple hidden deep within the jungle. According to the tome, the temple held the key to reversing the werewolf transformation. "Fornax, come look at this," Dylan called out, his voice hoarse with excitement. "I think I found something." Fornax hurried over, his eyes widening as he scanned the passage. "The Temple of the Moon," he whispered. "It's said to contain a sacred artifact that can cure any ailment." He gathered the remaining researchers, laying out his plan. "We'll split into 2 teams. One will stay here and continue working on a cure, while the other ventures into the jungle to find the temple." Murmurs of unease rippled through the group. "It's too dangerous," one researcher argued. "We'll be walking straight into the jaws of the beasts." "We have no choice," Dylan countered, his voice firm. "If we don't act now, we'll all be lost." As the researchers debated, tensions reached a breaking point. 2 researchers, their faces contorted with anger, began shouting accusations at each other. "You're one of them, aren't you?" the first researcher snarled. "A werewolf sympathizer." "How dare you?" the second researcher shot back. "I've been working day and night to find a cure." In the heat of the argument, a vial containing a sample of the virus shattered on the floor. The room fell silent as the liquid seeped into the cracks, its eerie glow pulsing in the dim light. The 2 researchers stared at each other, their eyes wide with horror. Slowly their skin began to ripple and shift, fur sprouting from their pores. Their screams of anger turned into feral growls as their bodies contorted, bones snapping and reforming. Dylan and Fornax watched in terror as the newly turned werewolves lunged at the group, their claws slashing through the air. Panic erupted as the researchers scattered, fleeing into the jungle. In the chaos, Dylan found himself separated from the others. He stumbled through the dense foliage, his heart pounding in his ears. The ancient tome felt heavy in his hands, a reminder of the impossible task that lay ahead. As he pushed deeper into the jungle, an eerie silence settled over the area. The only sound was the distant howling of werewolves, a chilling reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. Dylan's mind raced as he tried to get his bearings. He had to find the temple, had to retrieve the cure before it was too late. But with each step, the jungle seemed to close in around him, the vines snatching at his ankles and the branches clawing at his face. He stumbled into a small clearing, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The tome felt slick with sweat in his grip. He flipped through the pages, searching for any clue that could guide him to the temple. A twig snapped behind him, and Dylan whirled around, his heart leaping into his throat. A pair of glowing eyes stared back at him from the shadows, a low growl rumbling through the air. Dylan's hand trembled as he reached for his pistol, the metal cold against his palm. He had to keep moving, had to stay 1 step ahead of the beasts that hunted him. But with each passing moment, the howls grew louder, the eyes in the darkness multiplying. Dylan gritted his teeth, steeling himself for the long night ahead. He had to find the temple, had to save his friends and the people of Eidos. Dylan stumbled through the dense jungle, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The ancient tome felt heavy in his hands, the weight of its secrets pressing down on him. He had to find the temple, had to retrieve the cure before it was too late. As he pushed deeper into the foliage, a faint glow caught his eye. He squinted, trying to make out the source of the light. There, barely visible beneath the tangled vines and overgrown ferns, was a narrow trail marked with luminescent symbols, the same symbols that adorned the pages of the tome. Dylan's heart raced as he followed the trail, his senses heightened by the ever-present danger lurking in the shadows. The howls of the werewolves echoed through the night, a constant reminder of the fate that awaited him if he failed. The trail led him to an old abandoned Edosian settlement. The crumbling structures were barely visible beneath the thick layer of vines and foliage that had reclaimed them. But as Dylan studied the layout of the buildings, he noticed a peculiar pattern, a pattern that seemed to mirror the protective runes described in the tome. He pulled out the ancient book, flipping through its pages until he found the passage he was looking for. The settlement, it seemed, had been arranged in the shape of a powerful rune designed to ward off the influence of the werewolf virus. Dylan picked his way through the ruins, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. In the center of the settlement, he found what he was looking for, a hidden chamber, its entrance obscured by a thick curtain of vines. He pulled aside the vines and stepped inside, his heart pounding in his chest. The chamber was filled with ancient artifacts and scrolls, their surfaces covered in a thin layer of dust. But it was the small, ornate box in the center of the room that caught his attention. With trembling hands, Dylan opened the box. Inside, nestled in a bed of soft fabric, was a vial of shimmering iridescent liquid, the key ingredient in the cure for the virus. Just as he secured the vial in his pocket, a bone-chilling howl ripped through the air. Dylan spun around, his eyes widening in horror, as a pack of werewolves burst into the chamber, their eyes glowing with feral hunger. At their head was Fornax, his once kind face twisted into a snarling mask of rage. Dylan barely had time to react before the beasts were upon him, their claws tearing at his flesh. He fought back with all his strength, using his knowledge of the settlement's layout and the protective runes to evade their attacks, but he knew he couldn't hold out forever. With a final desperate lunge, Dylan broke free of the pack and ran, the vial clutched tightly in his hand. He could hear the werewolves pursuing him, their howls growing louder with each passing second. But he couldn't stop now, not when he was so close. With the tome as his guide and the vial as his hope, Dylan set out to reach the ancient temple, knowing that time was running out for the people of Eidos Prime, and for himself. Dylan's heart hammered against his ribs as he raced through the dense jungle. The ancient tome clutched tightly to his chest. Every rustling leaf and snapping twig sent a jolt of fear through his body, his senses heightened to the max. The jungle itself seemed to come alive as if it were a sentient being intent on thwarting his every move. He stumbled over gnarled roots and pushed through tangled vines, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The howls of the werewolves echoed in the distance, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond the shadows. As he navigated the treacherous terrain, Dylan's foot suddenly sank into the soft earth. He stumbled, barely catching himself before falling face first into the ground. That's when he noticed it, a narrow opening in the rock face, partially obscured by a curtain of vines. With trembling hands, he pulled aside the vines and peered into the darkness. The tome seemed to grow heavier in his hands, as if urging him forward. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the ancient text. There, in faded ink, was a map of the cave system leading directly to the temple. Dylan hesitated for only a moment before plunging into the darkness. The air was dank and musty, the walls slick with moisture. The only light came from patches of bioluminescent fungi clinging to the stone, casting an eerie green glow. As he ventured deeper into the caves, the walls began to change. Intricate carvings and murals appeared, depicting scenes of twisted experiments and dark rituals. Dylan's blood ran cold as he realized the true origins of the werewolf virus. The cult's leader, a powerful Edosian shaman, had consumed the luminescent flower and performed a forbidden ritual, becoming the first of the werewolves. The virus had spread like wildfire, consuming the cult from within. Dylan pressed on, the weight of this revelation heavy on his mind. The fate of an entire planet rested on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to fail. Suddenly a guttural growl echoed through the caverns, sending shivers down his spine. He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. There, emerging from the shadows, was one of the transformed researchers from the outpost, its eyes glowing with feral hunger. Dylan didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, his feet pounding against the stone floor. The werewolf gave chase, its claws scraping against the rock. Dylan's lungs burned as he pushed himself harder, faster, navigating the winding passages with the help of the tome's maps. He could feel the creature's hot breath on the back of his neck, could hear its snarls growing louder with each passing second. Just as he thought all was lost, he spotted a glimmer of light ahead, the entrance to the temple. With a final burst of speed, Dylan lunged forward, emerging from the caves at the base of an ancient ziggurat. The structure was covered in vines and overgrowth, its stone walls crumbling with age. But Dylan knew that somewhere within lay the key to stopping the virus once and for all. He glanced back at the cave entrance, his heart pounding in his ears. The werewolf was nowhere to be seen, but he knew it wouldn't be far behind. He had to move fast, had to find the cure before it was too late. Taking a deep breath, Dylan began to climb the steep steps of the ziggurat, the tome guiding his every move. The fate of Eidos Prime hung in the balance, and he was their last hope. Dylan's heart thundered in his chest as he ascended the cracked and crumbling steps of the ancient ziggurat. Vines and roots snaked through the stone, threatening to trip him with every step. The dense jungle pressed in on all sides, but he forced himself to focus on the temple entrance looming before him. As he reached the top, Dylan found himself face to face with a massive stone door. Intricate carvings adorned its surface, depicting the cycle of the werewolf virus in chilling detail. Images of Eidosians succumbing to infection, their bodies twisting and contorting as they transformed into snarling beasts, sent shivers down his spine. But it was the final carving that drew his eye, a figure consumed by radiant light, symbolizing the cure he so desperately sought. With trembling hands, Dylan retrieved the ancient tome from his pack. Its weathered pages seemed to whisper ancient secrets as he flipped through them, searching for the key to unlocking the door. The symbols swam before his eyes, but he forced himself to focus, drawing upon the knowledge he had gleaned from countless hours of study. Finally he found what he was looking for, a series of glyphs etched in faded ink that, when combined with the carvings on the door, formed a complex locking mechanism. Dylan's fingers danced across the stone, pressing and turning in a precise sequence until, with a groaning shudder, the door swung open. The chamber beyond was cavernous, its walls lined with pulsating bioluminescent veins that cast an eerie glow. The air was thick with the coppery scent of blood and the musty odor of ancient decay. At the center of the room stood an altar, upon which rested a gleaming golden apparatus. Its surface was etched with arcane symbols, and at its center was a small slot, perfectly sized for the vial of iridescent liquid Dylan carried. As he approached the altar, a deep, rumbling voice filled the chamber. "So, the human seeks to undo what we have wrought." Dylan spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. From the shadows emerged a twisted abomination, a grotesque fusion of Eidosian and werewolf. Its skin was a patchwork of fur and scales, its eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. The werewolf cult leader, transformed beyond recognition, fixed Dylan with a predatory gaze. "The cure requires a sacrifice," the creature rasped, its voice like gravel. "The life essence of a human freely given to activate its power." Dylan's hand tightened around the vial, his pulse pounding in his ears. He had come too far to turn back now, but the price of victory suddenly seemed impossibly high. The cult leader lunged, its claws outstretched, its jaws snapping. Dylan dove to the side, barely avoiding the creature's grasp. He rolled to his feet, his mind racing. He had to get to the altar, had to release the cure, but the cult leader stood between him and his goal. With a roar of defiance, Dylan charged forward, ducking and weaving as the creature swiped at him. His human resilience, born of desperation and sheer determination, fueled his every move. He lashed out with the tome, the heavy book connecting with the cult leader's jaw with a sickening crack. The creature staggered back, momentarily stunned, and Dylan seized his chance. He leaped past the cult leader, his hand closing around the vial. In one fluid motion, he smashed it against the gleaming apparatus, his own blood mingling with the iridescent liquid as it seeped into the device. The chamber exploded with blinding, searing light. Dylan shielded his eyes, the ancient tome slipping from his grasp and clattering to the stone floor. The cult leader let out an agonized howl as the radiance engulfed them both, ancient mechanisms grinding to life with a teeth-rattling rumble. Dylan's blood sizzled on the altar, mingling with the shimmering liquid from the shattered vial. He watched through squinted eyes as tendrils of energy snaked out from the altar, coalescing into a pulsing, writhing orb. It grew rapidly, straining against the confines of the chamber before bursting forth, an unstoppable wave of cleansing light. The brilliance tore through the temple walls like they were paper, the stone crumbling to dust in its wake. Dylan craned his neck, ignoring the searing pain that racked his body, and watched as the orb expanded into the jungle, washing over the tangle of trees and vines. Howls of agony and confusion echoed through the night as the light found its targets. Werewolves caught in the midst of their feral rampages began to change. Fur sloughed away, revealing smooth skin beneath. Claws retracted, jaws shortening and reforming until the monsters were no more. In their place stood Idosians, bewildered and disoriented, but undeniably alive. In the temple, the cult leader staggered back, his form rippling and twisting as the power of the cure stripped away his corrupted enhancements. With a roar of fury and desperation, he lunged at Dylan, claws outstretched. Dylan rolled to the side, his movements sluggish and uncoordinated. The chamber spun around him, but he forced himself to focus. As the cult leader stumbled past, Dylan lashed out with a well-placed kick, his boot connecting with the abomination's chest. The cult leader teetered on the edge of a yawning chasm, his arms windmilling as he tried to regain his balance, but it was too late. With a final, despairing howl, he toppled backward and vanished into the abyss. Dylan slumped against the altar, his vision dimming around the edges. He could feel his life force ebbing away, drawn inexorably into the golden apparatus. As his eyes fluttered shut, a vision bloomed in his mind's eye. He saw Fornax restored to his true form, leading the newly cured Idosians through the jungle. The bioluminescent foliage pulsed with renewed vigor, the once oppressive darkness banished by the gentle, healing glow emanating from the temple's heart. Dylan's lips curved in a smile as unconsciousness claimed him. The nightmare was over. Eidos Prime was saved, and as the darkness closed in, he embraced it, knowing that his sacrifice had not been in vain. Dylan's eyelids flickered, heavy with exhaustion, as he struggled to focus on the blurry shapes hovering above him. Muffled voices drifted in and out, their words indistinct, like whispers carried on a distant wind. He blinked, his vision slowly clearing to reveal the sterile confines of the outpost's medical bay. Fornax stood at his bedside, his face etched with a mixture of relief and sorrow. The Idosian's once vibrant tattoos now pulsed with a subdued, somber glow. He leaned in, his voice low and heavy. "The cure worked, Dylan. The transformations have been reversed." Dylan tried to sit up, his body protesting with a dull ache that seemed to radiate from his very bones. "How many?" he croaked, his throat dry and raw. Fornax's gaze dropped, his shoulders sagging under the weight of the truth. Too many, the virus. It left scars that even the cure couldn't heal. Some of our people, our friends, they were too far gone. Silence hung between them, a palpable presence that seemed to press down on Dylan's chest. He closed his eyes, the faces of those lost flashing behind his eyelids like a macabre slideshow. As the days crawled by, Dylan pieced together the aftermath of their harrowing ordeal. The Idosian government, desperate to contain the virus, had enacted a strict quarantine, cordoning off the entire region surrounding the temple and the outpost. The once lush jungle, a vibrant tapestry of life, now stood as a silent, forbidden zone, a haunting reminder of the horrors that had transpired within its depths. He turned to Fornax, his voice steady and resolute. "This isn't over. The virus may be contained, but it still poses a threat. We can't let this happen again. Not here, not anywhere." Fornax nodded, a glimmer of the old fire returning to his eyes. The government has already begun assembling a task force, a team dedicated to studying the virus and ensuring that this tragedy is never repeated. Dylan's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists at his sides. "I want in. I need to see this through, to honor those we lost and protect the innocent from the darkness that lurks out there." As he prepared to leave Eidos Prime, Dylan found himself standing at the edge of the quarantine zone, his gaze sweeping over the abandoned outpost and the jungle beyond. The once familiar landscape now felt alien, a testament to the profound change that had occurred within and without. Fornax approached, a small box cradled in his hands. He held it out to Dylan, his voice thick with emotion. "The Eidosian government has awarded you the Medal of the Luminous Spirit, our highest honor. Your actions, your sacrifice, you saved us all." Dylan accepted the box, his fingers tracing the intricate engravings that adorned its surface. Yet even as the cool metal pressed against his skin, he knew that the true reward lay not in accolades, but in the lives saved, and the unbreakable bond forged between him and the Eidosian people in the face of unimaginable horror. As his ship ascended through the atmosphere, Dylan leaned back in his seat, his eyes drifting shut. The memories of the werewolf virus, the battles fought and the lives lost, played out behind his closed lids, forever etched into his mind. But amidst the darkness, a flicker of hope persisted, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, and the lengths he would go to protect the innocent from the horrors that lurked among the stars. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.